comments to 3 minutes. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak today? Okay, come on up and approach the microphone. Hi, I'm Joe Kunzler. I signed in, and I understand I only have 2 minutes, so I'm going to talk really fast. 3. Thanks. Good. They don't have to talk so fast. But I was at the State Board of Health, and I figured this is the appropriate time to address you about what I saw at the State Board of Health. But I'm very appreciative of the resolution that was passed last August. I'm very happy that both Keith Higman and Dr. Thomas were exonerated of the trumped-up misinformation charges that were drawn up by CORE. I do understand the sentiment of having a health impact assessment, but to quote one of the State Board of Health presenters, I don't think we need more community process. I think that's just going to antagonize the antagonized, and it's not going to find a solution. I'm also not happy, and I feel like in any response it should be duly noted that the State Board of Health had a staffer tell me be here at 9:30 to testify, and then the State Board of Health let the cores testify at 1 o'clock. If I'm going to support any kind of a health impact assessment, I think we need to start by independently examining the cores, like U.S. Attorney Rachel K. Roberts wanted it on 15 July 2015, so we can get to the bottom of this. And I would again pivot you back to your resolution, the very intelligent resolution that says this responsibility rests at the federal, not local of government, and is funding accordingly. I noticed how the State Board of Health said repeatedly how they were clamoring for more funding, how they were worried about how bad public health was getting hit, and as someone who's grown a sense of respect after now attending 5 public health meetings, I don't think going after, dealing with people who choose to live next to a naval outlying field should be a top priority. I think dealing with issues like septic tanks and things like that aren't. I want to conclude with this thought. My hero, Captain Katie Higgins Cook, one of my Fat Albert pilots, said, "Calm seas don't make a skilled sailor." Well, we're not in calm seas right now. It's like, according to one of Corps and Crew's Olympic Peninsula buddy, Sally Spirit, we are still a long ways from any kind of mitigation remedy, but at least the state has noticed our plight, is willing to take corrective action with the county on the public's behalf, and has made comments regarding harmful jet noise pollution and needed studies in the new DEIS about the Grauer expansion, end quote. With statements like that, I think, frankly, we need to respond accordingly and say, this is really making the Navy supporters a little uncomfortable, that the people who want to close the base are making statements like that about health impact assessments. I'm not so sure this is a good idea. And you may notice I'm wearing these patches. One of these is from a lady pilot who wrote me a note to keep being awesome. So, I'd like to see her get to go out to the OLF at some point and get the proper training. So with that, I'll sit down and video the rest of the meeting. Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
You're quite welcome.
The State Board of Health, I think there's a good article in the paper, but I wanted to just make sure folks had the information. The State Board of Health had a hearing. We heard about it during the public comment period, and this was the memo that, they don't have their minutes available yet, but this was the memo that was used at that, according to their staff, that was discussed. There should be 3, I think. You got it? Okay. Of the recommended board actions, they took the first action, which is at the bottom of page 1, which endorsed the Department of Health recommendation to the Navy, directing staff to draft a letter of recommendation to the Navy to conduct a health assessment on that affects military jet noise on populations. The second motion that passed was that they said that the preliminary investigation supports the conclusion that Dr. Brad Thomas and Dr. Keith Higman have performed their duties as required under RCW 70.05.070, and they considered that complaint closed. But they didn't, they considered
considered, but we're unable to take action on the third motion, but what they're, which is at the bottom of page 2, which is a recommendation to the Island County Board of Health and Island County health officials to request an assistance for that planning effort in a health impact assessment. So I just wanted to, and that could be coming to us. Their staff member shared with me that there was interest from the chair in considering that at their future board meeting, and I'm hopeful that we can. I know you spoke this morning about a visit that was made with the groups from Oak Harbor about planning money that might be available. This also is a similar, as I understand, a health impact assessment is it's a planning tool to look at health impacts for projects. I've been also heard from the Department of Commerce that they also have planning resources that can help communities in dealing with military expansion, and so I am interested in exploring that in a way that we can be respectful of everybody and understanding that we have diversity across our community and looking at how best to move forward in a way that's proactive for our community and be a safe place to talk about our planning efforts going forward.
Can I ask a question? So let's say that we do this and it comes back that there's an unmitigatable health impact. Then what?
So I
mean, that's my underlying question. Then what? What? Then what?
So I don't think that my understanding of the health impacts assessment is not that there would be that kind of a conclusion possible from this. It's a convening of interest to try to move forward with meeting the needs of the Navy base as well as the needs of the community. It's a both and, it's not an either or. So that's how I have heard about this, both from the Department of Commerce program that I've had very brief conversations about, and with what I know about a health impact assessment. It's we are a military community. We have a Navy base in our midst, and there are statewide resources that are available to us to help us with those planning efforts. I'm thinking that the Board of Health could be a convener of that conversation, and if not, maybe there's a better entity that can do that. I think when we have state partners that are willing to help us with that, we should take advantage of that.
Are you talking about land use planning or an assessment of public health impact? I mean, I'm trying to understand, so what I really am trying to understand, as much as I'm capable on this issue. I own the fact that I don't have a lot of ability to understand another point of view on this, but what I don't understand is if the conversation is about a health assessment. It's not about land use planning, because there's land use planning dollars that are out there through other organizations. If this is about a health assessment, and it comes back that there is a negative impact on health that is unmitigatable with the land use planning that we've done, and that's the only piece of this that we can control is the land use planning. My question is trying to understand then what? What is the value of that conversation if we identify a potential problem? The only mitigation is then the removal of that activity. Is that the conversation that we're hoping to have?
I'm not. I think you are setting up a false choice here. I mean, what I see is that we have activities that are happening in our community. We have, the Navy is expanding their footprint here. We know that.
No, they're not expanding their footprint.
There are more planes that are coming, and there are more people that are coming. That's determined. Whether how that manifests itself, we don't know yet.
Okay, but it's not a footprint change. It's an
Well, I guess maybe we can. We don't need to. Okay, there will be there's a change because there was an EIS describing a change.
Change in operations.
If you want, yeah, there's a good there, and we know that that's happening. We have we we know that there are gonna be impacts to housing, that there's impacts to transportation, impacts to health. There's, I mean, in my mind, our role as local authorities is to ask the right questions and get as much information as we can so we can help our community move forward in the most positive way possible. That's what I'm talking about. So I'm not asking anybody to say yes, we should, or no, we shouldn't.
I'm just trying to understand, so I understand the impact on housing, right? And that where that would be a planning land use conversation. I understand the impact on transportation, increased people, more cars, so there's a place for that. Then there is the impact on health, right? So I don't understand the tie-in necessarily between health. So if we go out there and we explore that and we say more planes add an increased level of exposure to noise and therefore there's a health impact, then what? I mean, I don't know how you ask that question without anticipating the follow-on conversation, which is then what? So what happens if we discover that? And then are we going to be regulated to do something about it and say you can't live here? Are we going to say, well, airplanes and people are incompatible, so they have to leave? I mean, I know you keep saying I'm creating a false choice, but information, if what we think we're gonna do is have a conversation without gaining enough information to make a decision, I don't understand the goal of the conversation.
And I need to open this up to other people, but since I brought it up, I can take the first step at it. But, so if the increase in flights creates noise that is found to be detrimental to learning in the Google School District or the Oak Harbor School District, maybe there is mitigation money that we can put in to better insulate the school classrooms. You spoke with the folks. I don't know what the planning money that you are aware of that you identified when you were in DC, but I assume that some of that is for mitigation. It's to identify ways that you can mitigate and then
It's
But
land
you're not
use
talking about
planning.
this.
It's land use planning.
So,
it's-
but I see them as tied together. If what we need to do is better insulate classrooms so that the impact to our students from airplane noise, I don't know that that's gonna be an outcome. I'm just
But
saying
who-
that's
but
one of
then
the things
who
that was in the
pays for that?
EIS.
So who, are you saying that we're gonna undertake a study to identify health risks that the county will then go in and pay for? Because
so-
there's not federal dollars to go do that mitigation work necessarily. So
There could be state funds, there could be local funds. What I'm saying is that we should be asking those questions to find out what is the impact and what tools do we have to address them.
And I think we should identify the tools before we go out there and ask a bunch of questions that we are not prepared to answer. Because my biggest concern is, and I think we just need to own the fact that if we came to a choice between health impacts on our citizens and Navy presence in our community, are we prepared to choose? And if we're not prepared to choose, I would be careful about asking the question, period. I also want to be careful about getting in jurisdictions that aren't ours. So our role in these conversations is land use planning. That's the only thing that we control in this, is the on-the-ground activities that happen around the airstrip. We don't control the airspace, we don't control Navy operations, we don't control any of this. So going out there and engaging our community in the risks of this behavior, when we actually don't have control over mitigating those risks, I just want to make sure we're not doing something that is irresponsible, where we're going to take on consequences that may not be ours. We're going to ask questions we're not prepared to answer. I mean, I really think that before we go down this path, we just need to understand what the goal is. And I also want, I mean, I'm open to some of the conversations, but I also want to be clear that some of what's driving this are a group of individuals who want the removal of the airplanes, and they're using public health as a vehicle for that to happen. And so to go naively into a conversation around health impacts without thinking that one of the goals of at least one group is our community is to remove those airplanes completely, I want to make sure that this Board of Health is clear that if we're confronted with a choice like that, we're prepared to make it. And I you know,
I don't want CORE to be driving this bus, and that is not where this is coming from. I've talked to folks in the governor's office, I've talked to folks in and the Department of Commerce, these are not people who are associated with CORE. These are state agencies that are offering to help our community deal with what we're dealing with. And I'm just interested in finding out more about. I'm not trying to predetermine the outcome. I understand what you're saying about tools, and I'll just open it up.
But with that, Commissioner, not speaking on behalf of the Navy, but as a citizen of the county, if you will, these recommendations here are for the board, i.e. this panel, to decide whether they want to write a letter to the Department of the Navy, or to base more specifically, to ask if they would consider a health assessment. That's all this really is saying. I mean, if we do the hypotheticals, what if the Navy tells you PAC's and we're not going to fund that opportunity? That will drive other questions. But I think as a board, the question is, how do we respond to the recommendations given by the State Board of Health? And some of that context has to be, what is the end state that you're hoping to achieve as a team on behalf of the citizens, i.e. all the citizens of the island. So, but I think the first thing is to consider whether we want to go ahead and entertain the recommendations that the State Board put forward. And then what I think is part of that recommendation is it's the ultimate outcome. Because if the Navy were to come back, and again, I'm not speaking on behalf of them, but if they were to tell you, we're not going to fund this, we've already de facto funded this by doing our environmental impact study, and these are the findings of that impact study, then you've got to do the follow-ons, which I believe Commissioner Johnson is going into. So what's the next step? Do you fund another independent commission to look at health impacts related to sound or water or whatever it may be? So I think we need to consider that as a group as to what's the next step. And again, because I can conceivably say that's what the environmental impact study was designed to do. It was not only to look at that, but also to get public comment, which would drive further comment regarding that recommended function. And we also have to realize that we can't predict the future, but I can tell you that the end state of manpower on the base today is not the end point of population in 2022 when they lose one of their bigger PQ squadrons and they actually end up at the same level of personnel that they are today. Now, we live in a dangerous world, a very complex world, and our near-peer adversaries, namely the Chinese and the Russians, will drive some of the advancements in our technologies as we go forward. And we would, again, use the term naive, be naive to think that electronic attack would not be a critical component of how we hedge the power that our peers will bring forward. So I think as a team, we've got to address whether or not we're going to go ahead and put together another letter.
Just to clarify, we haven't been asked yet, but we're likely to be, or it's being considered at the next State Board.
If I may.
Sure.
For starters, I thought August 21st of last year we put an end to all of this conversation, but we still end up having it every health board. Doctor, thank you for pointing out that in 2022 the number of personnel here will be the same as they were 2 years ago too. I keep telling people that, and they keep coming up with these grandiose numbers of thousands of people more and saying we're to blame for the Navy's to blame for the housing problems in this housing. They're not. Anyway, the Navy received 4,200 comments on their during their extended comment period. They allowed an extra 45 days for their comment period for people in the public to respond to their EIS. I would imagine out of those 4,200 comments, there are going to be at least one or two that address them studying noise. I believe during their original draft EIS, they did study noise, and its effects, I'm sure that they will re-evaluate it. But what the Board of Health of the State Department of Health is saying is that they're saying that we should, as Allen County health officials, they're recommending that we request the Navy to conduct a health assessment of the effects of military jet noise on popular areas near Navy and Air Station Whidbey Island before implementing increases of Navy jet operations. It doesn't say anything about grant money for planning. It's saying that they want us to write the Navy a letter saying we want you to do a health assessment on the effects of noise. I think my next duty is going to be at that point, and if we're going to go to that point, and we're going to go after industrial noise, we're going to go after other business noises as well. Perhaps we should do a noise assessment of what it's like when on the neighbors next to Comfort's Winery or McMaster's Farm. Or maybe we should do a health assessment of the noises that come from fireworks, or that come from people driving too fast on the highways. Do we study every noise? And then what if they come back and they say, yes, it is quite noisy, and yeah, there could possibly be health effects. Dr. Thomas, you even said there could possibly exacerbate already existing health effects or bring about others. But no more, no less so than smoking or overeating or using too much sugar or dipping or drinking too much alcohol or using illegal or recreational drugs that are legal. Life can cause illness and adverse health effects. The only way to beat it is through death, okay? My take on this is we passed a resolution of August 21st of last year that said we were done with this issue. This is what initiated they're looking in and bringing charges on you, Dr. Thomas, and you, Mr. Hickman, and against us as the Board of Health as a general. And they said, you did nothing wrong, okay? You went ahead, you brought your report to us. Thank you for that information. I'm not in favor of posting signs at the park. I'm not in favor of posting signs anywhere. I'm not in favor of the Board of Health of Allen County being involved in this in any way, shape, or form. This belongs to the Navy. I know people that teach up here at Oak Hill Elementary and at the middle school, and they say their classes are never impacted. When they go outside for recess, they hear the jets if they happen to be flying. We sit in here all week long. I don't hear jets. What do we do if they come back and say, oh, it's an imminent danger? It's going to, if people live next to OLF, it's going to be, what do we do? Put a building moratorium on? Because what are we going to do if the Navy says we ain't leaving? Okay, we'll just do a building moratorium. So, I'm not in favor of sending any letter to anybody on behalf of anyone, and CORE is behind it, no matter how you look at it.
Thank you for your comment.
You're most welcome.
Yeah, I'll just say a couple things. Since the date in August that the commissioner's talking about, I have not decided to do anything in addition to, at least from my seat on this board. I was anxious to hear about the State Department of Health. I think they've made some recommendations here, all right. It does not sound to me like they're making a specific recommendation that this board do anything. I guess if they did, I would consider that if and when it comes. It seems to me we're having a lot of conversation about something that hasn't and may not happen from the standpoint of what this, or what the Department of Health at the state level thinks we should be doing here in Island County. I believe the EIS spoke about this, and I believe that there's been plenty of study on this already. And I happen to believe that yes, we can change land use. Having been involved in that in my career in the past, I would say we need to be very careful about how we move forward to try to do that. So I did spend some time in Washington, D.C. Commissioner Johnson and I are looking at opportunities, whether they actually would be any kind of an opportunity to change the health effects. I doubt, but we are in the very early stages of looking at potential opportunity from the federal level to help in this area. Again, very early stages, hard to tell what that really will look like if it happens. So.
Thank you very much.
Well, I guess my comments would be that we're a Board of Health, and that my presumption was that our concern is for the health of the community. And when there are people who are distressed, that for us to follow up with that, to look and evaluate what their situation is part of our role. And that the outcome shouldn't be decided before whatever assessment takes place, but that rather that we move forward based on the information that we get, based on that assessment. I think it can't really be more benign than for us to, as a Board of Health in Island County, to ask the Navy and see what their response is. I mean, it's up to them what their response is in terms of doing a health assessment or not, and that could then determine what our next step is after the fact. But there is enough concern, and I think it's also separating out that this is not a land use per se. Our role as the Board of Health is the health of the community, and that it may be difficult to separate roles when you are a county commissioner versus that of someone who is sitting on the Board of Health. That sometimes the two become intermeshed, but that this is a Board of Health, and we ought to be at least attentive to the health needs of the community, even if that involves some discomfort in what our passion happens to be. So in terms of supporting the military.
Can I move up and do what
I was gonna wrap it up because we're.
I just wanted to add another, can we schedule, ask the chair, I'd like to hear a presentation from the hospital